What are you waiting for, huh? Hi, this is Matt at State of Flux, and happy 4th of July, everybody. This is a review for I Know What You Did Last Summer, one of the rare 4th of July slasher films. The spookiest of all holidays? I'm not really sure why this film takes place on the 4th of July, but the framework works, and it works especially for this review on this day. This is a film that I have quite a bit of a fondness for, even though I recognize in full that it's not a particularly great film. Directed by Jim Gillespie, not the greatest horror film director, though I do want to give him props, and I'll give him props shortly. First, I want to discuss another person behind the scenes of the film, and that would be writer Kevin Williamson. Kevin Williamson wrote the script prior to writing Scream, but after Scream hit big, they rushed this into production, and this film was heavily marketed as From the Mind That Brought You Scream. And I think audiences, including myself at the time, thought that they were going to get another really interesting reinvention of the horror genre like they did with Scream, and instead got a film that was much more of a throwback to what slasher films were, free of any meta installation that you see in Scream. There's a little bit of that in the dialogue, but it's more self-referential dialogue than anything else, not so much meta dialogue that the Scream franchise really honed in and operated on. That said, the one thing I will say about Scream is an undeniably better movie. It is a better directed movie, better acted movie, certainly a better written movie. It operates in full better than this film. That said, I do think that shy of the opening scene with Drew Barrymore, which is a phenomenal scene and scary as hell, Scream isn't altogether scary. It operates on a high level of tension because of that opening scene, and there's quite a bit of suspense to it, but I find Scream more disturbing, especially with the real-world implications of it, than I ever found it scary. I Know What You Did Last Summer is actually scary. The suspense is tense, and the release of it is pretty strong, and I think a lot of that has to do, similar to Scream, in the sense that there is a long time between the opening kill of this film, as there was with Scream, before the next person dies. There's almost an hour of runtime where nothing happens and few people die. It's more of a slow build of menace that keeps getting bigger and bigger until it compounds on itself and becomes a slasher film that we expect it to be. And I think this film has a couple really strong set pieces that are genuinely frightening, especially the one with Sarah Michelle Gellar. Speaking of the people in front of the camera, this film I don't think operates through the success of Jim Gillespie's direction so much as it works on the success of the phenomenal performances in front of it from much of the core four characters of the film. You have Jennifer Love Hewitt, who plays the film very bubbly in the beginning, then has the turn with the dark presence that happens after the accident, and then has this somber, quiet, incredibly depressed disposition throughout the rest of the film. Jennifer Love Hewitt is able to capitalize on both sides of that completely effectively and believably. It's a good performance, overshadowed by the fact that she is acting opposite often Sarah Michelle Gellar, who gives a phenomenal performance in this film that's a 180 from the character you see her play weekly at the time in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She is flirty and fun in the beginning, and then the accident happens, and a shadow is cast upon her character the rest of the way. It's not the same kind of depression that you get. It's a stagnancy of character. She thought she had a big, bright future, and this accident stole that from her, and she has to live with it, and it's shown in such great work that she does. These actresses elevate this script. Ryan Phillippe is an actor I'm not traditionally a big fan of, but I do think he is really good as Barry in this movie. He is completely despicable, unlikable, and awful, yet whenever he's on screen you can't really look away. He's quite magnetic. The only one that is not the greatest is Freddie Prinze Jr. Now, I thought when I was first watching the film that a lot of his flatness was to be was like an acting choice for the red herring of it all, but having seen I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which we might discuss like next month or next year or whatever, I'll tackle it at some point. I don't feel like it was an acting choice. I just don't think he's that gifted as an actor, and I've seen him in other things, She's All That, some things that are more recent, and he's never really done much for me. I like listening to him on podcasts, though. He seems like a really cool dude. But surrounding these core four actors are a couple other really strong performances. You have Johnny Gulacki, who is playing a character completely 180 from the character he played on Roseanne, or would go on to play with Big Bang Theory. You also have Bridget Wilson, who gave up a performance, a reprisal of Sonya Blade in Mortal Kombat Annihilation to be in this film. A career move that I think was probably for the best, even though she didn't go to like great heights after this. Certainly better heights than than Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Lastly, the film has Anne Heche, who we lost a couple of years ago, but she was a very talented actress, really, really gifted, and she elevates the hell out of this film. Every time her character comes on screen, you cannot look away. She is that good. She steals every scene, and she is phenomenal. The cast really helps elevate this film, because what you're left with is a relatively bland slasher film that seems like a nice throwback to 80s slashers a la Prom Night, which was a film that was heavily mentioned in Scream. This film follows a very similar structure. You have an incident before where you're following characters, an accident that happens, and then you pick up sometime later with the characters having to live with this accident that had happened as somebody is preying upon each of them. In a lot of ways, it is a kind of sister film to Prom Night just as much as it is a sister film to Scream. And it is executed relatively well, but there is a general flatness to what it is, which is just a simple slasher. That said, the thing that I find interesting about it is it's a mystery. But it's a mystery that doesn't work as a mystery because the mystery itself is unsolvable. And it's a film that works better once you know the resolution of the film and can go back watching it free of the mystery aspect and are able to piece together the story knowing how it ends. It works. You see, the film is framed as a whodunit, but it's not a whodunit because the person who's doing the notes, the person who knows what they did last summer, is not a character that you're really familiar with. In fact, this is a film that I think led inspiration to Saw. The killer is the person they hit in the beginning of the film. The killer is the person they killed, who didn't die, and he knows what they did last summer. This is an impossible thing for you to solve while watching the film. However, when you know this, there's quite a bit of backstory that's leading up to that that's told like loosely through the text, but a lot of it subtextually and through like little bits and pieces of information that it doesn't really become clear until you know that he's the one who is doing it to really understand what the hell is even going on. It made for a very confusing first watch for me and a much better rewatch, and every time I have watched it since then, it makes more sense what's going on. And that's because he was out there that night having just killed somebody himself who we are meant to think is either setting up a red herring or whatnot with the Anne Heche character or with Freddie Prinze Jr.'s character. There's so many fingers pointed throughout the film as to who could possibly have done it when none of them are even the answer. And the person that never gets their finger pointed at them is the victim. This is something that, as I say, the first Saw operated on in a weird way. So in a sense, this is a good sister film to Saw as well. That said, so it's a mystery that works better when you don't watch it as such, and that's kind of unique, right? But I like the complexity and the richness to it and the backstory, and that's one of the things I've always liked about the slasher film genre. is there's usually a big, rich backstory that you watch through repeated viewings to pick up any tiny little morsel that you can get. You can do this with the Friday the 13th franchise, certainly with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and certainly sequels help flesh that stuff out. But I like going into the original ones specifically and trying to pick up and glean little information that you can that's jam-packed in there, because virtually all of them have it. Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, Prom Night, like Candyman, like Child's Play. All of them have this element, and this film has it too, and that's something that I've always liked. The lore that fleshes out the why of the killer is doing, and that's really unique and interesting. But I am singing the praises to this film in a weird way without acknowledging a lot of its faults. I acknowledge that one of the faults is that it has this weird screenplay that is like this traditional slasher, which is okay, with a lot of rich backstory, but it's a mystery that's an unsolvable mystery. Yeah. One of the other things that I have to complain about is that this is the most male-gazy movie I have ever seen in my entire life, for a film that does not feature any nudity. There are more cleavage shots than you can ever possibly imagine, so much so that you become immune to them pretty swiftly, and then like you're just disinterested in engaging any further. At least that was my reaction. Like, even when I was a kid when this movie came out, I was just like, hot damn, there's a lot of like cleavage in this movie, to the point where it's kind of a turnoff. And I don't know, that's just something that especially upon this rewatch, I was just like, good lord. The other thing that I have never been able to unsee is that I like the look of the slicker, the killer in a slicker with the fish hook and stuff like that. It's unique. It's a fresh presentation of a killer. But once he's unmasked, the entire last act of this film has the killer, Ben Willis, in just street clothes. But his street clothes are almost exactly that of Ernest P. Worrell. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so I'm watching the whole ending of this film where you have Ernest essentially trying to be this big menacing figure, and I'm just waiting for him to be like, know what I mean? Yeah, it's funny. I'll see if I can whip a picture up here for you. But yeah, that takes you out of a movie right when you notice it. Jim Varney, not the scariest guy in the world. That said, I like this film. It's full of a lot of big dumb shit. Like, there are some scenes in this film that are just so laughably, inexplicably, impossible to have happened. The body that's found in the trunk, Julie leaves the trunk screaming after seeing this body covered with crabs and seaweed and like sea muck. She goes running, grabs her friends because she's already close to the house. They go up to the car, open the trunk, and it's completely cleaned out. No body, no sign of wetness, no crabs, nothing. It's pristine. That scene is asinine. The fact that during the parade, Barry sees the man in the slicker up in the corner and then goes to chase him down and gets there and just beats this guy down, and it's this old man who's like, "What are you doing to me?" Meanwhile, there is not a single cloud in the sky. What the hell is that dude doing in a full slicker? That scene always gets me to crack up. There's a lot of them. The completely daft police officer that you get in these movies, who has Sarah Michelle Gellar in the back of his car in a scene that's shockingly similar to Scream 2, but this is where you have a director who is incompetent with that material, has no ramp up for the tension, has the killer kill the cop and then go after Sarah Michelle Gellar. She runs. The scene eventually becomes tense once she's in the department store with her sister, but that car scene doesn't work. just 2 months after this film came out, you got a similar car scene in Scream 2 with Sydney and her best friend Hallie in the backseat of a car with the killer driving around, and they have to crawl over his lap to get out of the car and escape. A much more tense scene, a much more better directed scene, a smart scene, a scary scene, and that just shows how Wes Craven is kind of a master at his work, and this filmmaker hasn't really been able to establish the same level of career as Mr. Craven. But as I say, I have a fondness for this movie. It's insanely watchable. It's a relatively compelling movie. It spawned one of the worst sequels I think I've ever seen. And a sequel to that that's somehow even worse. And maybe I'll review them each. But yeah, every 4th of July I try to like revisit this movie, even if it's only just rewatching the trailer or whatever. There is a very 4th of July vibe during some of the parade scenes and stuff like that. And it's just a movie that from my childhood that I like and recognize. I give it 3 stars. I think it's a pretty solid watch for fans of slashers. What do you make of this film? And do you want me to do a review for I Still Know maybe next month, or should I wait until next 4th of July? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Happy 4th, everybody.